Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. Welcome to our Sunday morning Parsha class, Parsha of Pekudei, the final Parsha of the book of Exodus, the second book, the book of Shmos. And as we refer to it in Judaism, it's the Parsha of Shabbos Chazak. So we conclude the book every time you conclude one of the five books. We proclaim Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek. Be strong, and be strengthened. So that's the Shabbos. We conclude the Parsha, the Chumash of Shemos with the Parsha of Pekudei. It's a beautiful Parsha, if I may say so. It's a really nice Parsha. Why is it so nice? It reminds me of when, if any of you have done construction or renovation, and it takes sometimes a few weeks, a few months, a few years, right? Depending how intense your construction is or renovations are. And it's always like, I don't see an end in sight, right? When is it? The contractor says it's going to be 2 weeks, and it's already 4 weeks, and I don't see it. So the Jewish people, and then finally, when you finish, it's like, like finally, we're able to move in. This is what I dreamed of. This is how I envisioned it, and now finally, I have what I wanted. And this week's parsha, we do exactly that with the Mishkan. The Mishkan that was built, the tabernacle that was built by the Jewish people in the desert, where after all the time that took to give all the donations and collect all the material, and to obviously Hashem designed it exactly how it should be done, but it needed a lot of thought through the various craftsmen that were involved in it, and the artifacts that were there, and the garments that were there, and everything together. Finally, at the end of this week's parsha, it's done. It's made. It's erected. It's constructed. And the most important thing is, does it work? Does it work? What does it mean? Does it work? The point of this whole Mishkan was that it should be a dwelling place for Hashem. That there should be, Hashem should be able to be present in this Mishkan. And how do they see that? Through the clouds of glory, right? With the Hashem's cloud descend on the Mishkan. That was the question. Was it going to work? And the end of the parsha concludes that yes, after they put up the Mishkan and all that was involved in that, finally, yes, Hashem's Shekhinah, cloud of glory, descended upon the Mishkan, and now we know, Hashem has ultimately forgiven the Jewish people, because we know that the Mishkan was there as an atonement for the sin of the golden calf. So now that they knew, not only did they build it correctly, but that their repentance has been accepted, and Hashem forgave the Jewish people. That's the conclusion of the parsha and of the book of Shmos. It's a beautiful way to end. And next book, Vayikra, Leviticus, really deals with what happened now. So Hashem speaks to Moshe from the new Mishkan. Up until now, it was always from this tent. It's called the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. Now it's moved to this new tent, this new, not a tent, this new place, the Mishkan. And this is where Hashem speaks to Moshe. So next week, and in the Vayikra, the whole book of Vayikra pretty much is speaking about the various laws that were taught in reference to the service in the temple, in the Mishkan. But here we conclude the book of Exodus. The Jewish people left Egypt. Beginning of it, we have the servitude in Egypt. We have the plagues. We have leaving Egypt. God choosing the Jewish people, giving them the Torah, Mount Sinai, and building the Mishkan. That's pretty. The sin of the golden calf, building the Mishkan. That concludes the story of the Exodus, and then we move on next week, the next third book, to the many laws that are involved in general in Torah, but more specifically connected to the book. To the service in the temple. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of the Parsha. Parsha Pekudei. We'll read a little bit inside. We'll see, I think, a very powerful message over here, with something that seems to be like a mistake or something that Moshe forgot. And ultimately, the way we understand it is that it just teaches us of how to view another Jew, how to view another person. It's amazing. Okay. Parsha Pekudei can be found on page 602, 603 in the Good Chumash. chapter 38 of Exodus, verse 21. So it begins with taking an account, right? When you're doing construction, oh, Jill's here, right? So we know what it means where there's so many expenses. You have to keep track of where everything is coming. How much is insurance paying? How much is it going to be out of pocket? Is this worth it? Where's this money going to? I knew I had a couple of $1,000s here. Now it's gone. What did it go to? Right? You gotta keep track. You gotta keep track. Anyway, what's going on?
Call me the other day to ask where her baskets were.
It was the wrong person.
It's like the two partners. The two partners who had a joint account, and one of them turns to the other and says, Yankel, what happened to the money in the account? It's all gone. What happened? So the other guy says, Yankel, sorry, whatever his name is, says, hey, just put it all back.
That's good.
Okay. So the verse reads, Eile Pekudei HaMishkan Mishkan Ha'edus. These are the accounts of the tabernacle of the testimony, Asher Pukad Api Moshe, which were counted by Moshe's command. Avodas HaLeviim, B'yadi Samar, Ben Aharon HaKoyin. All these items were serviced by the Levites under the direction of Isamar, the son of Aaron, the priest. And in other words, the Torah tells us this is something that was by the command of Moshe. Moshe says we have to make an account. We have to give an exact accounting of all the income and expenses, right? We need a balance sheet. How much came in and what was used for. The reason for this was, unfortunately, Moshe knew that some people are going to judge him. And people are going to say, hey, Moshe Rabbeinu, he was the one in charge of collecting all the funds. And yeah, he probably pocketed a little bit, right? Yeah, he's wealthy because he was in charge of this whole fund, right? I have this foundation. We give out a few $1,000,000 a year. And I also live in a beautiful house because even though I'm not a recipient officially from the funds, but I get a hefty check because it's a very successful foundation. People saying, hey, can we trust Moshe? People weren't actually accusing him of it, but this was like what people were like shushking about during the Kiddush. Hey, Moshe Rabbeinu, what's going on with him, right? So Moshe says, you know what? I got to come clean. I don't want this. I don't want anyone to have any questions or any doubts. I want to just, let's do this together. We're just going to count. We'll see exactly how much came in and exactly what it went for. And this is, you can say, almost like a lesson, people who are involved in nonprofits and things like that, where you just want to be, above and beyond. They say there's actually a halacha in regards to like a pushka, like a charity box, right? A pushka you have on the tables in the synagogue, right? People come and put in a couple of dollars, right? So it says something like the person in charge shouldn't take out the money in public, like taking out the money and counting it, right? Even though that's his job, right? You got to take out the money, count it, and put it wherever it goes. But people may think, oh, maybe he's stealing from the charity box. You just got to be extra careful the way people perceive things, that it should be done in a way that no one has any doubts, even in the back of their mind, like, oh, do we trust them, right? You got to be extra careful. It says that people who are collecting tzedakah for others, it actually says that they have to be extra careful not to live a little bit above average lifestyle, even if they could afford it. And whatever they have, whoever their income is, and they can generally afford a nicer car or a nicer house, nicer clothes. But because they're also involved in public, nonprofit funds, where people could always have a doubt, well, maybe they're doing something that is not exactly by the books. So therefore, they should live a very average lifestyle. For that exact reason, just people shouldn't have any doubts. I have a relative of mine who's actually a rabbi somewhere in the States, and he got a gift. A community member gifted him with like a Mercedes. It was a complete gift, a total gift, right? He didn't pay a penny for it. Someone in his community really loved him and gave him this gift, a beautiful gift. He was driving it, and he heard like from people that I heard that someone was saying, "Hey, look at the rabbi's new car," and says, "You know what? I don't need it. I don't need this." He says, "Get me a simple whatever it was, Toyota, whatever, regular, average, decent car that drives, just because I don't need people to talk about." Right, and this is what we see from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe says, which normal person was doubting Moshe Rabbeinu, right? We don't know Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Moses, he came on that mountain. He was a Ish Lakim. He was almost like he was half human, half godly. I mean, he spent 120 days on the mountain, didn't eat, didn't sleep. He's not He's not a regular person. Who would doubt Moshe? Well, you have what we refer to as Litzani Hadar, the scoffers. Okay, some people came up with this crazy thing that we said, see, Moshe said, you know what? I'm coming clean. I don't need this. Let me just tell you exactly what the money, where the money came from, and what it was spent on. And that is what this parsha is about. Pekudei, the parsha of the counting. So that's the first section of the parsha. And then it goes on to talk about how they, last week we spoke about how they built a lot of the Mishkan, the Kalim, the artifacts of the Mishkan. This week we speak more about the garments, and then we conclude how they actually erected the Mishkan. But let's read another few verses over here. What happened with the gold, with the silver, and the copper? We're going to jump to verse 24. Kol hazahav ha'asir limalacha. All the gold that has been used for work. B'chol malachas hakodesh, in all the work of the holy sanctuary. What was the amount of gold? The gold that was donated was 29 kikar. Kikar is a measurement, it's like a weight. 730 shekels, according to the shekel measurement system, which was used for sanctified items. So kikar is a weight, and then the shekel is what is an addition to the weight, right? You can get like the heavy weight, pieces of gold, then you have the change, right? The smaller pieces. So the shekel over here was also like the measurement, the weight of gold, but the kikar was like the much more heavier pieces of gold. What is the measurement of kikar? It's important to realize this because we'll see from the continuation. A kikar is roughly 3,000 shekel. The value of the weight of 3,000 shekel is 1 kikar. Okay, so how much gold was needed? 29 kikar of gold. Do the math. 29 kikar of gold, 29 times 3,000. That's the amount of gold that was needed, plus 730 additional. How much is it? 87,000. Is that what it is? Okay, 29 times 3,000. 29 times 3,000, 87,000. That you said? Okay, thank you, Lance.
But the shekel was a coin.
Well, we're talking about the weight of a shekel.
The weight of
the weight of a shekel. It's like today we have coins that are made of anything with recently.
penny cost you 4 cents.
Right. Right. So it used to be that the shekel was really about the value of the shekel was the shekel itself. Right. So
the shekel could put on the scale and use as a weight.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And there's gold, I guess gold or silver, right? Depending what it was made out of. So you have 87,000 plus 730 shekel. That was how much gold that was donated. It was a lot. It was an enormous amount of gold. And we're actually told that it wasn't enough.
Where did they get this?
So where did they get all this gold? So
Earrings.
they had a lot of jewelry.
Yeah.
When they left Egypt, if you remember, they emptied out Egypt. The Egyptians gave them all their wealth, right? And then again, by the splitting of the sea, when
They lost a lot.
so for whatever reason, the Egyptians brought all their wealth with them as they were chasing. So yeah, I'm going to war. I'm going to take all my important jewelry. And then so when as we know the story where the sea spit them out again, because some people were doubting what happened to the Egyptians, were they really killed? Maybe they're going to come around and from the other side. So the sea spit them out and all their wealth with that. And again, they started collecting all of their wealth. So people were very wealthy. The Jewish people were very wealthy. That's how they had this whole sin of the golden calf, right? They had so much, maybe too much wealth. So we're actually told that with that 29 kikar of gold, which wasn't even enough, and Moshe on his own had to add to the gold. So that is about the gold. What about the silver? Verse 25. The kesef pekudei ha'edam as kikar. The silver census money from the community was 100 kikar. Obviously, silver worth a lot less than gold, but it was 100 kikar, right? 100 kikar is 300,000 shekels of silver, and the elef ushva meiz b'chamisha v'shivim shekel b'shekel kedge, and 1775 shekel according to the shekel measurement system, which was used the sanctified items. Right, so you have 300,000, 301,775 shekels value, weight of shekels, silver shekels, for that's the amount of silver that came in. And then the verse says something very interesting, because how do they collect silver, right? All other materials that were collected was donated without any specific amounts needed per person, right? If you had gold, you gave gold. If you had copper, you gave copper. If you had the different wool and the different stones and whatever else was needed, people gave however amount they were able or willing to give. With the silver, we know that there was a set fixed amount per person. What was that? A half a shekel. Every person gave a half a shekel of a silver shekel. Half of that was per person, right? How many Jewish people were giving, right? What was the number? 600,000, right? We know there were 600,000 Jews. So there were 600,000 half shekels. So how many shekels did they get? If 600,000 people gave each a half, each person gave, so altogether, yes, 600 half shekels, which is 300,000 shekels. Right? So
600,000, does that count men and women or just?
So it was men and women. It was like a family, a unit, right?
Oh, your family.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
So let's see so the Torah actually specifies that. What was this thing? So beka lagul geilis is consisted of one beka per head. What is a beka? It's a half a shekel. Machzor a shekel b'shekel hakodesh. A half a shekel, which is the value of a beka. So it was a half a shekel per person. Who was the speed reader before? I'm trying to be that speed reader, okay? So you have basically the exact amount of how many Jewish people left Egypt. So the exact amount was 600,000 plus a few. What was the exact amount? We always round it off to 600,000, but the truth is there were more than 600,000. It was 603,550. So there were an extra 3,550 people. Okay, now do the math. Right? So the Torah did this math, right? So basically, the 600,000 equals 100 kikar, which is 300,000 shekel, and then plus the 1775. Where's my thing board? 1775 times 2 is 3,550. Okay. Now, I'm only telling you this because even if you don't do the math yourself, but the point is that the Torah tells us that there was exact amount of Jewish people giving the half shekel, which was 600,000 plus 303,550. That's the exact amount of silver that came in. It was the equivalent of 600,000 plus an additional 1775, which was for the 50 people, extra people. Okay. So now the Torah says, what did the silver go to? So it divides it in two. The 600,000 half shekels that came in went to, they melted it and they made the sockets, which was the foundation for the poles, for the wooden beams that made up the walls of the Mishkan. So the walls of the Mishkan were these wooden beams, right? We spoke about the acacia wood, right, a few weeks ago, and they each had like a silver socket that was like a foundation, which held up the beams. So those sockets, I guess it was a lot of silver, that was made from the 600,000 half shekels or the 300,000 shekels, right? And then we had the additional 1775 shekels. What was that used? So in verse 28, V'es ha'elef, right? And the additional 1775 shekels, what was that used for? That was used for the hooks and the outside of the Mishkan. They had like a little courtyard. They had a little fence, like a gate, like with draperies, like with like a material hanging, and they had like these silver hooks that it was hanging on. Those hooks were made out of silver. They have to also use, right? So they have to melt silver to make these hooks, and that was a lot of a smaller amount. That was what was used for the additional 1775 was used for those hooks. Okay, let me go on to the copper. What was that? Those used for the various altar, the altar that was made out of copper, etc. But there's something very interesting about this little thing about silver, because the Medrash and the commentaries go a little wild with this conversation here about the silver. Why are we talking like dividing? First of all, why are we even talking about what it went for with the silver? We don't mention it by the gold, and also like what's this idea of like the hooks? So it says something interesting. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was going through what the silver was used for, he actually forgot. He forgot what happened with the additional 1775. He knew what happened with the 600,000, or let's say the 300,000 kikar, that main amount, that bulk amount of silver. He said, of course, we use it for the sockets. We know that. That was what we used it for. But then he's thinking the 1775, there's an additional 1775 shekels of silver. And Moshe says, I can't figure out, I can't remember what it went for. And I was like, ooh, this is a problem. This is a real problem. He was trying to think. And suddenly Hashem obviously is watching all this, and he realizes, okay, Moshe's in trouble. I got to help him out. And a heavenly voice came out and said, Vavei ha'amudim, the hooks, remember the hooks. Oh, the hooks. Yes, that's what it went for. So you remember the hook. That's why we say, in those people who know the trup, V'es ha'elef, it's like a big announcement. And the additional 1775, it went to the hooks. This is like alluding to this midrash that there was like this, that Moshe forgot, and he was reminded about the silver hooks. Okay, interesting midrash. But obviously, there must be a deeper layer to this story because, well, Moshe forgot. I mean, Moshe wasn't like a regular, come on, there must be more significance to this story that he forgot. Like, why would he forget? Like, Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't like a regular guy that was just like, hey, I have a notepad. I kind of, like, he was, I mean, what's the meaning behind this forgetting this, the additional 775? So I saw a very interesting explanation. Moshe didn't forget what happened to the actual silver. He knew what it was. What's this idea that the 600,000 people were each giving a half a coin? We know that every Jew has a letter in the Torah, has a connection with the Torah. Some use the expression almost like every Jew is like married to the letter of the Torah. Like the Torah is like a relationship. It's like, this is my connection to God through the Torah. That's why you have this idea where even one letter of the Torah is missing or is even cracked or broken, right? It's invalid. The entire Torah is invalid. I'm sure you heard the story. It's one of the big Chabad stories where the emissaries of the previous Rebbe once went to, I think it was in Chicago, and met someone there, Jewish businessman, and they spoke a little bit about Judaism, and then the businessman took out a checkbook to give them a check. It says, you came obviously for the check, so they said, we're happy to take the tzedakah. We actually didn't come for the tzedakah. We came to talk about Judaism, and he had a connection to Chabad, whatever. And he was like very surprised. He's like, really? Like, I always know that when rabbis come to my office, they're coming to collect money. So they gave this analogy of every Jew is a letter of the Torah, and sometimes Jews, their letters are a little cracked, a little faded, and we're like the scribe. We're here to fix everyone's letter. And the guy really loved it. The guy liked the analogy, and they came back to the Rebbe to report to the previous Rebbe to report their conversation. And the previous Rebbe said, I actually don't like this conversation because I don't like this analogy because yes, we all have a letter in the Torah, but none of our letters are cracked or invalid. We're all valid. The question is, I said, he said, I like the analogy better of every Jew is like a diamond. Sometimes the diamond is covered over, it's dirty, so you got to polish it. But once you polish it, you realize that the diamond is always intact. It's a complete, beautiful diamond. Sometimes it's just covered over, so he used that difference in analogy. But the point is that we all have a letter in the Torah. So it says like there are 600,000 letters in the Torah. And there are 600,000 Jews. So we all have our letter in the Torah. Yes.
Does it change or we have one specific letter?
So it's a good question. I don't know if it means like literally like there's one, like this is my letter, like I have the letter Aleph and you have the letter Beis. It's the more symbolically that we have that connection. Every letter is like the Torah represents all Jewish people by the 600,000 letters and the Jewish people. Now again, it's not like there's exactly like you say today, well, they're exactly 600, it's 600,000 souls, right? There are general 600,000 souls, and there are splinters of these souls. Even if there's more than 600,000 people, Jewish people, as there are, obviously, many more than 600,000, but it's like the 600,000 souls that many Jews are all connected to one type of soul. So everyone has this connection. And by giving, when the Jewish people are coming and giving the half a shekel, that was like their connection to the Torah. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu is looking around the Jewish people, and he says, wow, 600,000 Jewish people have this beautiful connection to the Torah, to God, to the religion, to Judaism. Amazing. But then he says, wait, there is the shekels that came from the additional 3550. The additional 1775 shekels, which came from the half shekels of the 35. These were the 600. This was the 600,000 plus the additional people. Now it's not just there were more than 600,000 people. So like that's the total number. No, these were the people who Moshe Rabbeinu didn't see their connection. These were the type of people who maybe weren't living that type of life where their connection to the Torah was apparent, was something that was important to them, that they were living by it. It was something that at face value, you look at them, you say, I don't see this. I don't see how this is something who you are or important to you. You're not living by it. Your Judaism is not something that's in the forefront. Are you, maybe they weren't coming and having a Seder or Passover. They weren't coming and, hearing shofar on Rosh Hashanah. They weren't living a Jewish life. These are obviously whatever was in the desert, but it was people that seemingly were like they were outside of the 600,000. So when Moshe was talking about the silver and what it went to, it wasn't just like, hey, this is silver and what it went to, but it's more like the symbolism of it was that these are people who are coming and connecting to the Torah, and this is going to the Mishkan. But there are certain people that I don't see it. Like I see the silver that they gave, but I don't see how this was given to be involved in this mitzvah, in their connection to Hashem. That is what was missing. There was people on the outside. So this is what it means that Moshe forgot. Not that he forgot what it went to, but he forgot. He couldn't see the connection between these additional people to the Mishkan, to the Judaism, right? And if you think about it, right, we say there are 600,000 letters in the Torah and to 600,000 souls, but these are people who seemingly don't have a letter. These were the additional 3550 that seemingly don't even have a letter in the Torah. So where are they in the Torah? Seemingly they're not part of this system. They're outside of the system. So he didn't know what to do with it. He's like, I don't know where it went. They gave, but they're not part of the Torah. They're not part of the 600,000. They don't have a letter in the Torah, seemingly. So this is what Moshe was like, a little stuck. So what happens? So Hashem says, remember the hooks. Remember the silver hooks. Or the silver hooks. The silver hooks were people were on the outside. They were on the fence. But even though they're on the fence, but they're still part of the Mishkan. They're still part of the Mishkan. The Vavei Ha'amudim, in Hebrew we call it Vavei. Vavei means the hooks. They're still part of it. They're still part of it. In Hebrew, Vavei means hooks. Vav also means the letter Vav, right? What's the letter Vav? The letter Vav is like a prefix, right? In Hebrew, Viv means it's not the word itself, but it's and. It's like something that it's added to the word. So these people not necessarily had a letter in the Torah, but they were from the Vav. What does that mean? So there's a very interesting, I think this is a midrash as well. It tells us what happened a little bit. What was going on the mountain, right? 40 days, 40 nights, and additional days as well, where Moshe was on the mountain speaking to God. One of the things that happened there is Moshe comes into a room and he sees that God is writing the Torah. But as we know, you don't really have this in a regular print, but in the way the Torah is written in the Torah scroll, there is something called crowns to letters, where there are 7 letters
We have crowns.
that have crowns on it. Shatnez Gaz, Shin, Ayin, Tes, Nun, Zayin, Gimel, Tzadik. 7 letters that, in addition to the letter itself, they have these little like crowns. In Hebrew, we call them koitzin. They look like thorns. It's like little like things that like stick up from the letter. Maybe later I can show you from a print that has the this type of font. These additional, like in addition to the letter, there's like these little crowns or thorns that go on top of the letter. And Moshe Rabbeinu sees how God is adding these little things to the letters. And Moshe says, what's this about? Like, why it looks so nice, it looks beautiful. Don't add anything to it, right? I had this friend who was an artist, and he used to draw like portraits of people. And he never was happy with his work. He says, I have a problem because when I start drawing, I can't stop. I go more detail and more detail and more detail, and then eventually I ruin it. It's too much. Oh, yeah, right. You're an artist. So you don't know where do I say, well, this is perfect? Because he's a perfectionist, so he says, well, I have to do more and more and more. But then he realized that he did too much. So whatever. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Hashem, look, the letters are nice. The letters are nice. Why are you adding these crowns? And Hashem told Moshe, in years to come, there's going to be a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, right? The famous Rabbi Akiva. And he is going to take these extra letters, these crowns on the letters, and he is going to learn heaps and heaps, mountains and mountains of laws from these additional crowns. That because it has an additional crown, it means so and so, right? Everything is alluded in the Torah, and he's going to figure out what is these additional crowns hinting to, and what is the significance of these crowns. That's the story. One of the things that happened, right, behind the scenes while Moshe was on the mountain. What do we see from here? We see something interesting. We see that Moshe was very, very happy with the letter itself. The letter itself. You don't need anything additional to the letter. And what did God say? That there is also additions to the letter. Addition to the letter. The crowns on the letter. And you, Moshe, may not see right away what the significance of that is, but it's also included in the Torah. It's also included in the Torah. And who's going to recognize this? Akiva. Akiva, right? Who was Akiva? You know the story of Akiva, right? Rabbi Akiva, at the age of 40, he still was an ignoramus, right? He didn't know the basics of Torah. In fact, he actually despised Torah scholars. And he was a simple shepherd. And then with the story, with the water and the rock, he realizes that water could penetrate a rock, so too the Torah could penetrate my heart. And he went to study and became one of the greatest sages of all time. Rabbi Akiva recognized, he knew what it means for someone to be outside of this system, outside of this perimeter of Torah, someone distant. Someone who seems to be like a thorn, right? It's not just it looks like a thorn because it's looks like a little thorn on top of the letter. But what does a thorn mean? A thorn is something that's prickly, something that's not you want to get rid of. I got thorns in my garden. Let's get rid of it, right? So there are the people who sometimes we feel like, oh, these are the thorns of the community. We got to get rid of them, right? Rabbi Akiva says, no. Let's take these thorns, and we're going to learn some important things from this, right? Because ultimately, they are part of the Torah. They are part of the Jewish people. Maybe that Moshe himself had a hard time with, or didn't come naturally to him. Rabbi Akiva did see it. So going back to the story of the counting of the silver, Moshe says, 600,000 Jews gave half a shekel, which makes up the 300,000 shekel. I get that. I know exactly what it went for. It's part of the Mishkan. It's the foundation of the Mishkan. It's the silver. It's the sockets. Great. I see their connection to this idea of the Mishkan, of connecting to Hashem, having a God dwelling amongst us. I get that. But the additional 1775, which was representing the additional 3550 of the Jews who are outside of the 600,000, I don't see their letter in the Torah. I don't see their connection to all this. They're not living this type of lifestyle. Moshe had a hard time with it. He forgot. He had a hard time seeing this connection between these people and the Jewish people and the Mishkan. And they have to have this heavenly voice to remind Moshe, the vavim, the hooks, like a hook that connects things. It's the prefix. It's something which is an additional to the letter. Remember those thorns that they weren't sure about. Those represent the additional 3550. You may say they're not living up to actually have a letter, but they're part of the Torah. They're part of the Torah. You got to just hook them in. They're part, bring them in. Don't forget about them. Don't forget about them, because ultimately they're part of this big system of the Torah. Right? Sometimes we have to learn from our enemies, right? It says Haman in the Megillah says, Yeshno am echad, there is this one nation, mufuzar mufurad ben which is spread out and divided amongst other nations. So the Rebbe says, yeah, he was talking about the division amongst Jewish people, but ultimately, how does he start his sentence? Yeshno am echad, there's this one nation. Am echad, ultimately we are one nation. And it's the 600,000 letters of the Torah with the crowns, with the thorns, with all the addition to the letter, which is all the makeup of the Torah. It's all part of the Torah. And ultimately, you got to bring everyone in, because everyone ultimately has, like the previous Rebbe says, that little diamond within them. So they're part of it. Yes, it may be covered over. Maybe they're not living up to it, but it doesn't mean that's not part of their DNA. It's not who they are. So Moshe forgot about it. The Moshe Hashem had to remember. And Rabbi Akiva really lived up to this. He experienced this. He was perhaps one of those people who Moshe would have thought that he was outside of this system for 40 years. And then, he was brought in. And many other people just like that could be brought in. So that's, I think, a very nice way of learning, understanding the story where, the Torah divides the 600,000, the additional, and the Midrash, how Moshe forgot about this. Just to conclude with the story, which is probably a story you've heard many times, where talking about after the Holocaust, when there was this idea that I don't know if it's the Jewish Federation or whichever large Jewish organization had this idea that because we've lost so many in the Holocaust, every Seder, we're coming up to the Seder in a few weeks, every Seder should have an additional chair, an empty chair, and to remember that extra child that is now not at the Seder because of the Holocaust. And the truth is, after October 7th, there was the movement as well to do the similar to the hostages or those that were killed during this terrible war on October 7th and after, and the soldiers, or to add a chair to remember the lost soul, which is a beautiful idea, right? It's a beautiful idea that to remember. And when this idea came to the Rebbe, what did the Rebbe say? You could guess if you haven't heard it before. The Rebbe says it's a wonderful idea to add a chair, but you should fill the chair. Fill it with who? Fill it with someone who wouldn't otherwise celebrate Passover. So you're not just putting a chair to remember, but you're actually doing something. You're reaching out to that Jew that maybe is not living that type of life. Maybe Pesach could go by and I'm okay. I won't have a Seder this year. And maybe they don't even know that it's Passover this year. I heard it when I was a child. At one time I had matzah, but it's been 50 years since I celebrated Passover. Invite that person to your Passover Seder and fill the extra chair. And that is the way we remember the people who passed away. So that's my little thought for this week. Thank you for joining us. Have a Shavua Tov, and hope to see you next week.
Has anyone ever figured out or